You talk because silence terrifies you. The moment there's no sound, your brain screams. Your body itches to fill the void. You reach for your phone, turn on music, say something, anything to avoid it.
Because silence doesn't just expose what's around you, it exposes you. From the time you were a child, you were trained to respond. Someone speaks, you answer. A message appears, you reply. A pause in conversation, you rush to fill it. This isn't connection, it's compulsion. You've been conditioned to be reactive, not reflective. Silence isn't emptiness, it's presence. It's pressure. It forces the other person to sit with their own discomfort, their own thoughts, their own lies. Most people can't do it. And so when you stop talking, when you withhold words, you force them into confrontation, not with you, but with themselves. You think being quiet makes you weak. But think about who controls the room. The one who needs attention, or the one who doesn't. The one explaining themselves, or the one who simply watches. You've been lied to. You were taught that expressing yourself constantly is power. That vulnerability means openness. That silence is suppression. But what if it's the opposite? What if silence is the ultimate expression of control? Real silence isn't passive. It's chosen. It's the moment you could speak but don't. The moment you could react but remain still. That stillness isn't emptiness. It's pressure. And pressure makes people break. You don't get disrespected because you're quiet. You get disrespected because your silence is nervous, uncertain, incomplete. Real silence, weaponized silence, carries weight. It has direction. It says, I know something you don't. I feel something you won't. I see something you're avoiding. But here's the truth. Silence only works when you're not afraid of it. When it's not just the absence of sound, but the presence of power. People feel that. They feel when you're holding something back, not because you're scared, but because you've already decided they're not worth explaining to. Words are cheap, and when you talk too much, you teach people how to ignore you. But when you speak rarely, intentionally, and with control, your words cut. Your silence cuts deeper. Look at who society respects, the loud or the calculated, the people who explode in every argument, or the ones who just look at you and let you burn in your own noise. The most dangerous people are not the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who don't need to. Because power doesn't announce itself. It sits. It waits. It watches. And when it finally moves, it doesn't explain. It ends things. You've spent your life giving people access to your mind through every sentence, every reply, every defense. And in doing so, you taught them your patterns. You made yourself predictable, containable, weak. But when you stop reacting, when you stop explaining, you become unreadable. And unreadable people are feared, not because they're dangerous, but because they're unknown. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You need to be silent in a way that unnerves people. The kind of silence that doesn't beg for attention, but demands it. Not because you're screaming internally, but because you've mastered the urge to respond. And that kind of silence, it changes everything. They'll call you cold, distant, passive-aggressive, emotionally unavailable. They'll say you're hard to read, hard to trust, hard to love. Not because you've hurt them, but because you've stopped explaining yourself to them. That's the first sign they feel your power. We live in a culture that demands constant expression. If you're not posting, talking, performing, reacting, you must be hiding something. Because silence in this world looks like threat. It makes people paranoid. It forces them to wonder what you're thinking. And that uncertainty, that's control. Here's the secret. Silence breaks fragile egos. It removes the illusion of control from people who need constant validation. When you don't respond, they can't manipulate. When you don't defend, they can't frame you. When you don't explain, they can't twist your words. You rob them of the weapons they normally use, and that's terrifying to them. This is why most people will try to provoke you. They'll bait you with insults, push your boundaries, misinterpret your silence as weakness. But they don't want truth. They want your reaction. Because once you react, they're back in control. Don't give it to them. A well-placed silence in the middle of chaos does more than any speech. It flips the dynamic. You stop playing their game. You force them to play yours. But here's the hard part. Weaponized silence doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel satisfying in the moment. It's not revenge. It's not about showing them. It's about staying still when every part of you wants to lash out. It's emotional discipline, and discipline is ugly, uncomfortable, misunderstood. Silence isn't the absence of feeling. It's the mastery of it. You think strength is standing up and shouting what you believe. Sometimes it is. But sometimes, strength is biting your tongue while the world demands an answer. It's not being quiet because you're weak. It's staying silent because you've seen how loud people collapse. They want to fight. They want the drama. They want to see you sweat. But when you don't engage, they're left with themselves. And most people can't handle that. They need distraction. They need your voice to drown out their own thoughts. That's why silence cuts deeper than any insult. It mirrors. It reflects. It exposes. It makes them uncomfortable. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you didn't do what they expected. And when people can't predict you, they can't control you. The truth is, silence shifts power. It creates space. It invites doubt. And in that space, people start to reveal themselves. They fill in the blanks with their own projections. They expose their insecurities, their fears, their desires, all without you saying a word. And here's where it gets dangerous. When you become comfortable with silence, people start fearing what you could say. Your words gain weight because they're rare. Your presence becomes louder than noise, and your restraint becomes your sharpest blade. You don't need to argue with fools. You don't need to clarify to manipulators. You don't owe explanations to people who twist them. Every time you stay silent, you remind them that they don't own access to your mind, that your attention is earned, not owed. They'll call you heartless. They'll say you've changed, that you've shut down. Let them. You've just stopped bleeding for people who feed off your reactions. That's not heartless. That's healing. And maybe they'll leave. Maybe they'll push harder. Maybe they'll talk louder. Let them. Because every word they throw at your silence is proof they're losing control. You're not fighting them. You're letting them fight themselves. That's the art of real power. Doing less while they do more. Holding the line while they cross it. Being still while they spiral. They exhaust themselves trying to pull you in. But silence doesn't move. Silence watches. And silence wins. You start to notice it. The silence makes them speak more. They over-explain. They justify. They start arguments with themselves because they can't get a reaction out of you. The void you leave by not responding becomes unbearable for them. And in that desperation, they reveal everything. They tell you more than they should. They project. They spiral. And all you did was say nothing. Because silence doesn't just reveal power, it reveals truth. Not yours, theirs. It shows you who needs validation, who's uncomfortable with themselves, who can't live without being seen, heard, understood, and who only speaks so they don't have to think, so they don't have to feel. You begin to see how addicted the world is to noise. Not just talking, but performing, narrating, justifying. Every moment online, every post, every comment, it's all a plea. Don't forget me. Don't ignore me. Please react. People equate being ignored with death. That's why silence feels like punishment to them. They'd rather be hated than invisible. They'd rather fight you than be left in their own stillness. And when you become the one who chooses stillness, you become dangerous. Because you're not fighting for attention. You're not begging to be understood. You're not in the arena with the rest of them. You're standing outside it, watching. That's when people start to fear you. Not because you're violent or cruel or superior, but because you don't need them. Because you've become immune to their noise. Because your world doesn't collapse when they exit it. Your silence becomes sacred, a space that not everyone gets to enter. And that, more than anything else, commands respect. But here's the paradox. People say they want honesty, peace, maturity. What they really want is engagement, reaction, attention. If you give them silence instead, they'll say you're toxic, detached, cold, because silence breaks the illusion that they're important to you. And maybe that's the real threat. Not what silence says, but what it doesn't say. It leaves space for them to wonder. And in that wondering, they lose certainty. And certainty is what they cling to when they don't know who they are. When you don't give people your emotions, they question their impact. When you don't give them your voice, they question their relevance. When you don't give them your defense, they question their story. Your silence makes them face themselves. And that's the one thing most people are desperate to avoid. So they'll provoke you, push you, paint you as the villain, all in hopes that you'll break your silence and give them something to work with. Because even your anger feels better to them than your absence. But the real strength? It's not just staying silent. It's staying silent when you know you're right. When the facts are on your side. When you could crush them with the truth, but choose not to. Because you no longer need to be right. You need to be free. Silence gives you that freedom. The freedom to choose your battles. To walk away. To not be dragged into every emotional war that others start just to feel alive. You realize most arguments aren't about truth. They're about control, about dominance, about the need to be seen and validated. When you withdraw that currency, the argument dies, and so does their illusion of power over you. But this isn't easy. There are moments when staying silent feels like swallowing fire, when every part of you screams to correct, explain, defend, fight. But the more you resist that impulse, the stronger you become, not just in their eyes, but in your own. Because silence isn't just something you use against others. It's something you use on yourself. It makes you sit with your own pain, your own fear, your own confusion. It strips away the distractions and the lies. It shows you what's real. It teaches you what actually matters. And what matters isn't being understood. It's being at peace. You'll lose people through silence. But you'll find yourself if silence speaks to you. Subscribe, and let the void keep whispering. There's a difference between being silent and being silenced. When you're silent by choice, it's power. When you're silenced by fear, it's weakness. The world wants to confuse the two, so that when you go quiet, they assume you're broken. They assume you're lost. But the ones who truly master silence, they're more alive than anyone else in the room, because they've stopped wasting breath on noise that changes nothing. You'll start to feel it when you pull back. The first wave is doubt. You'll question whether staying silent is making things worse. You'll wonder if they're forgetting you, if you're losing the moment. But the silence is doing its work. It's speaking without you. Because silence creates contrast. When everyone else is loud, the quiet person becomes magnetic. When everyone's performing, the stillness becomes mysterious. When everyone's reactive, the observer becomes powerful. But silence isn't just social. It's spiritual, psychological, existential. It's the space between reaction and response. It's the moment you break free from programming and choose not to play the role assigned to you. The world wants to provoke a version of you it can control. Your silence tells it. That version is gone. You start to notice how often you were talking just to be accepted, just to be liked, just to be heard. You start to hear yourself differently. The old you, trying to explain, trying to fix, trying to be understood by people who never deserve to understand you. Now, you don't speak to convince. You speak when it's necessary. And that shift? It's massive. Because you begin to see what silence gives you. Space. Space to see clearly. Space to feel deeply. Space to actually think. It gives you back your mind, the one they've been renting for years with distractions, dopamine, drama. And once you have it back, you protect it with silence. People don't respect what's free. They respect what's scarce. When your words are everywhere, they mean nothing. But when your voice is rare, when your energy is selective, it creates value. Not manufactured value, but earned value. And that's when you become untouchable. Because the loudest people need the most from others. Attention, validation, reaction. But you don't need anything from them. Not because you're better, but because you've stopped trying to get filled by what keeps emptying you. You learn to sit in the pause, to feel the discomfort without fixing it, to endure the moment without breaking it with words. That's where your edge comes from, your restraint. Anyone can speak. Very few can hold still while the room burns. Fewer still can be the room that burns others by refusing to be lit. You don't need to correct the lie. You just need to not participate in it. You don't need to argue to win. Your absence wins. Your silence suffocates the performance. Your refusal to engage ends the show. But don't confuse silence with apathy. You feel it all. You just choose not to spill it everywhere. Because you've learned, some truths aren't meant to be said. They're meant to be felt in the space between what could have been said and wasn't. And that kind of silence, it echoes. People carry it with them. They replay what you didn't say. They feel your absence more than they ever felt your presence. And the mystery of that stays longer than any explanation could. You used to try to be memorable with words. Now you're unforgettable with silence. Silence doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't perform. It simply is. And in that being, it holds more gravity than noise ever could. And the longer you stay in that gravity, the less you care who doesn't understand it. Because your peace isn't up for negotiation. And your silence, that's where your real voice lives now. They used to talk over you, interrupt, dismiss. They didn't even realize it, because you trained them that your voice was optional. You trained them that your words were cheap, that they didn't have to stop and listen. You filled the gaps before they felt uncomfortable. You protected them from your silence. Not anymore. Now, when you speak, it lands. Not because your voice changed, but because you stopped throwing it at people who couldn't carry it. You became intentional, rare, focused, and people feel that shift. They may not name it, but they feel it. The tension, the uncertainty, the power. Because silence doesn't just change how you communicate, it changes your value. You were easy to read, now you're hard to reach. You were always available, now you're selective. You were overexposed, now you're mysterious. And here's what no one tells you. The less you speak, the more people lean in. Not because they care more, but because their ego needs to decode you. They need to know what you're thinking. Silence creates questions, and humans hate questions they can't answer. That's why silence makes people project. They'll create stories, assign motives, imagine insults you never delivered. They'll argue with the version of you that only exists in their head. Let them. Because the moment you stop clarifying yourself to people who never listened, your life becomes yours again. There's freedom in not explaining, not because you have something to hide, but because you finally see the cost of being understood by the wrong people. Your silence protects what your voice used to give away: access. And access is everything. People don't respect what they can reach anytime. They respect what makes them earn entry. So you build walls, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You stay quiet, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You don't respond, not because you're cold, but because you no longer play games you've already outgrown. You start to see how noise was always a performance, a dance to be liked, to be chosen. But you're not performing anymore. You're not seeking. You're centered. And from that center, silence radiates. It's not an absence. It's a presence that demands its own space. You don't interrupt anymore. Not just conversations, but chaos. You let people spiral. You let energy burn itself out. Because you've learned, not everything needs your voice to be resolved. Some things collapse better in silence. You watch how people reveal themselves when you don't feed the fire. You watch how manipulation fails when you don't bite. You watch how quickly people lose interest when you don't give them your attention. And that's your clarity. Silence shows you who's there for you and who's there for the version of you they can provoke, shape, or feed off. The stiller you become, the clearer you see. Not just them, but yourself. You see how much of your life was noise, reaction, emotional turbulence. You see how often you spoke out of insecurity, not truth. How often you argued for your limits, explained your wounds, justified your silence when it never needed justification. Now, you say less, and somehow you say more, because your presence speaks, your stillness speaks. The energy you don't waste now feeds your growth, and the silence you once feared has become your home. They won't understand it. They'll miss the version of you that was loud, reactive, easy to predict, easy to read, easy to control. But that version of you served its purpose and died in the quiet. What's left now is something rarer, something stronger. Not because it's louder, but because it doesn't need to be. Silence is no longer your defense. It's your identity. You don't need to be loud to be remembered. That's the final illusion silence destroys. The idea that you must always speak, always share, always perform in order to matter. You don't. Presence isn't volume. Power isn't noise. Some of the most unforgettable people never raise their voice. They walk in, say nothing, and change the atmosphere. Not with what they say, but with what they carry, with what they withhold. Because silence is a filter. It separates those who get it from those who need you to explain it. You've spent your whole life trying to be heard, but maybe now, finally, you understand. The goal was never to be heard. The goal was to hear yourself, without the interference of noise, performance, validation. And when you start to hear yourself clearly, you stop trying to shout over others. You stop needing to prove your worth in every conversation. You stop explaining your choices to people who don't live with the consequences. That's the shift. You become so rooted in your own clarity that silence becomes your language. And only the right people will ever understand what you're saying. Not everyone will. That's the point. Most people can't handle silence, not because it's empty, but because it holds them accountable. Silence mirrors back what they've been trying to avoid, themselves. And maybe that's why your silence makes them so uncomfortable. Because it says, I'm no longer playing this game. It says, I don't need your permission. It says, your access to me was a privilege, not a right. Silence reclaims your space, your time, your energy, your peace. It doesn't beg. It doesn't explain. It doesn't chase. It simply exists, unbothered, untouchable, and undeniable. And in a world addicted to noise, that's power. You won't always feel strong doing it. Some days you'll be tempted to break the stillness, to explain, to scream, to prove you were right. Don't. Hold your silence like a blade. Use it like a boundary. Treat it like the highest form of self-respect. Because the more you speak with your presence, the less they can take from your words. This is where control lives, not in domination, but in discipline. And when they wonder what you're thinking, when they search for the version of you they used to control, when they try to bait you into reaction, you smile and say nothing, because nothing is exactly what they fear. And sometimes, nothing is what finally sets you free. Now ask yourself, if they could no longer hear your voice, would your silence still haunt them? Drop your answer in the comments. Let them feel how loud silence really is. And if silence reveals who you are, what happens when you stay silent in love? What if what you're calling connection is just addiction to noise dressed as intimacy? In the next video, we'll show you why the love you keep chasing might be the most beautiful lie you've ever believed.